All right, everyone. So welcome back to part 3 of meditation and personal change. And this talk is about loving and accepting our imperfections, if you will. Before I get into the talk, again, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon and anyone who's contributed financially who allows me to have the time and resources to continue sharing my experience, hopefully for the value of others out there on the internet. All right, so loving and accepting our imperfections. We talked a little bit about, in the first talk, the 4 kinds of change. In the second talk, we really looked at things that don't change, the things that we can't change. And now we're going to look at loving and accepting our imperfections. So when we are guided skillfully on this path, I think we tend to grow naturally in self-compassion, self-acceptance, self-love. And we don't love ourselves because we're so awesome, we're so great. So again, it may feel this way early on in our spirituality. We might feel a little bit like we're becoming super people. And like, to use a crude term, our shit doesn't stink, right? We can start to feel like, wow, I'm just becoming so great. It might feel like all of our baggage is dropping away, and we can go have these amazing blissful experiences, and we just begin to think like we're going to solve all of our problems. And at least in my experience, for the vast majority of people, real serious spiritual seekers, people who practice seriously and meditate, it doesn't happen like that. There may be periods like that, or especially early on, it might feel that way. And then we sort of settle into our lives. And again, we'll see these 4 kinds of change happen over the course of our spirituality. And so when we encounter the last kind of change, which I'm saying things that don't change, we really have to learn to accept these things. So we learn to love ourselves not by denying our imperfections. Quite the opposite is kind of learning to love the quirks of the being that is expressing as you as a human being. And so again, the imperfections. You learn to love yourself because you are so human, and to be human is to be imperfect. Humans are by nature, they're limited, they're imperfect. And that's true of all forms. Okay, I'll repeat that. That's true of all forms. That's not just true of human beings. So there's no such thing as a perfect dog, or a perfect car, or a perfect circle, or a perfect planet, or a perfect star, or a perfect nation, or a perfect song. It just doesn't exist. Okay? You might feel like certain things are perfect, but then if you talk with other people, you're going to find that other people disagree with you. Right? There's nothing where all of humanity agrees that this thing is perfect or that thing is perfect, right? We all have different opinions about things. Perfect food. Is there a perfect food? Is there a perfect band? Is there a perfectly beautiful person that everyone thinks is beautiful? I guess, again, we can have more or less consensus, but there isn't ever a situation where everybody agrees, okay? So all forms, and a human being is a form, and that includes her body, her emotional life, and her mind. Okay, that's basically what it means to be human, is you have a physical existence or experience of your senses, you have emotions, and you have thoughts. And that's pretty much the experience in a nutshell. And again, is it ever going to become perfect? Are you ever going to look at that through the eyes or lens of whatever you're measuring. I don't know where you're getting your idea of what a perfect human is, but are you ever going to look at this being and see perfection? And I think the answer is no. So this is not an excuse to be immoral, unethical, unconscious, or unloving. I want to be very clear about that. So this isn't an excuse to say, well, I'm never going to be perfect, so who cares? I'm going to do whatever I want, or anything like that. We're always open to change, to growth, to seeing that we could be wrong about something, being willing to explore those possibilities, because change could happen at any time, right? It could happen at any time. And doesn't mean it will, but it can, okay? So this is just a fact. You might think there have been perfect people, like maybe if you're a Christian, you think Jesus was perfect. But again, someone who's a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Muslim, they're going to disagree, okay? Or they might disagree. Someone who's an atheist certainly might disagree with the statement that Jesus was the perfect person. So what is, again, anytime we're judging ourselves, right? Something is wrong with me. Where is this? Where are we getting this idea from? Is it because other people have told us people should be this way? But where did they learn that from? Where did they get that idea from? Maybe from a religion, maybe from their society or their culture, maybe from their parents or their friends. But what did these people know? You know, the people that wrote the scripture, the people that started the religion, the people that created the society, your friends, your parents, what did they really know about right and wrong? Where did they learn that from? Again, these are questions that we often don't look at and don't investigate. We just assume, oh, well, we just all know it's bad to do X, Y, Z. But in the example I gave in the other talk, is it bad for a woman to be strong-willed? But until recently, in many cultures, it would have been seen as bad. It would have been seen as unsightly, unfeminine, unattractive. Does that mean it actually is? No. Because in a culture like ours, that's held up as a high value for a woman, a strong woman, a strong, independent woman. We love that in our culture, okay? So cultural ideas, cultural norms, cultural right and wrong, these things shift and change, okay? And if that's simply what we're judging ourselves against, then it's kind of like rolling the dice. There are always people that show up who are more strong-willed, and then there are people who show up again who aren't. It doesn't make the strong-willed ones good or bad. It doesn't mean the not strong ones are good or bad either, okay? All right, so again, Jesus, many people might agree, many people might not agree. For instance, Jesus drank wine and he ate meat. For some people, if you say that someone drinks wine and eats meat, they immediately take you off the spiritual or the enlightened track. For them, that's enough. They're just like, oh, nope, that's it. How could you be enlightened if you're doing those things? So again, anyone who you could hold up as an example of a saint, someone who's perfect, someone who we all ought to emulate, you're not going to find agreement there. So this idea of the perfect person, I want to be perfect. What's wrong with me, right? I have these problems. And again, in a sense, I'm not saying there aren't things that we can't see that ultimately need to change about us. But some of these things are maybe actually not actual problems. And they're just things that our culture disagrees, that our culture thinks isn't valuable, okay? So in my experience, there's really only one way to fully accept our humanness, our imperfection, and that is to know our perfection. It sounds like a contradiction, but this is really knowing our true nature, our true self, the ground of our being. This is what holds our smaller identity. Our smaller identity is a function of our bigger mind, you might say, from a Buddhist perspective. And so when we know our Buddha nature, our true nature, I find the more that we sit into that, the more comfortable we are letting our humanity be really human and accepting the limitations of being human. And we stop being so hard on ourselves, and we stop being so hard on others as a result. These two go together. People who are very judgmental of other people and hard on other people, these are usually ultimately people who are very hard on themselves. They have a lot of self-loathing. And because of that, they try and point out all the problems with others because they feel like they have so many. So again, it's just sort of the way the ego functions. So when we know our true nature, our Buddha nature, we very often tend to stop obsessing about our imperfections. And a lot of our egoic behavior can actually start to drop away automatically. We stop trying to prove ourselves to anyone. We learn to love ourselves and, as an extension, others just as we are. We really kind of see the beauty in that imperfection. We have patience and self-love, compassion, again, for ourselves and for others. And this is why in my teaching, I like to say that true compassion starts with you. It starts with this process of going inward with meditation and really seeing the imperfections of our small self. When we're unconscious, when we're in ego, we're constantly trying to defend against admitting that we're wrong about anything, or that we have anything that needs to change, or that there could be anything seen as wrong. Part of the meditation process, I think, is really seeing the shadow side of our personality and ourselves, and really being willing to face that full on and accept that full on. And again, in my experience, some things change. Some things change very quickly, some change more slowly, some change through surrender and grace, and then some things don't change, at least maybe for a very, very long time, maybe even lifetimes. And again, if we're not careful, we catch ourselves being frustrated or judgmental. And I don't think either of these really serve us. So again, learning to accept and to love our own humanness, our own frailty, our own imperfection, but from the vantage point of Buddha nature and true nature and our true selves. So this is why the 7th century Zen master, Sang Tsen, he said, "True freedom is being without anxiety about imperfection." So by being truly loving and accepting of our humanness and our imperfections, we find we're actually better able to personify the perfection of our divine nature. Because again, our divine nature is in love. It's in love with you and all of your imperfections. It's in love with me and all of my imperfections. It's in love with all of creation. It is love. And so by cultivating a love and acceptance for ourselves, And that allows us to really express this love outward. And these eyes, as imperfect as they are, they begin to see the world in the way that the divine or the Buddha nature sees the world and sees others and sees ourselves as well. So again, this is not making an excuse for bad behavior. Okay, if somebody who's a student of mine, usually I find that people who, can't stop stealing or, doing other unethical things, cruel things, they're just not drawn to this teaching. But if by chance you're somebody like that and you're thinking that this is a permission slip to just do whatever impulsive thing you want to do and then say that you're going to accept it as divine self, this isn't right. This isn't what I'm teaching you here. There's so much about the way we relate to ourselves and others from the perspective of divinity that that sort of selfish behavior has generally been transcended at this point, and you find that you are not able to act in a completely selfish way, that you always, it may look that way to other people, but there's always a recognition of the interconnectedness of all beings, and you simply cannot act with only the benefit of this particular person in mind. It's just not possible for you anymore. So if that's what you're thinking this means, then absolutely not. You need to go back to square one and start there. Okay, start with your ethics and just understanding about being a decent and good person. But having said that, there's never lived a human who has been universally loved and accepted. There's no such thing as the perfect human. What would that look like? Humans are forms, and all forms are imperfect and limited. Okay? They just are. I don't care who, if someone has a guru, they may feel like their guru was perfect. Okay? But there are other people who met their guru who didn't think that. So again, no such thing as this perfect person. Doesn't exist. You're never going to be her or him because it doesn't exist. Okay? So this is just simply true. This is just a fact. There's no perfect person, and that's why none of us can ever be a perfect person. So we can kind of give up the jig. Does it mean we can't keep trying to improve? Of course not. Of course not. If you're really awake, then you know that part of being awake and part of being alive is you just have to accept that you're going to continually grow and learn and expand as a being. That's just part of this. It's part of the joy of being. So there's no idea of, no, this is just the way that I am and I can't change. Having said that, part of the last talk was about there will be things that don't change. We might want them to change, but they simply don't. And that is part of this as well. So someone like Jesus is widely loved. Many teachers like Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, they are widely loved. They may not have been perfect people, but they're widely loved. So why do you think that is? Why are these teachers held up so highly? What is it? Is it because they're so perfect? No, it wasn't that there's, again, Buddha ate meat. He actually died because he ate some meat that was spoiled, some bad meat, that ended up killing him. And I'm not saying eating or not eating meat either way. I'm just saying, for some people, that's even some Buddhists today would say, like, oh, you eat meat, that's unenlightened. That's being cruel or violating a precept. So again, if we look into the personal life of anyone that someone holds up as perfect, someone will be able to find problems, issues, things that they see as imperfect. So why are these teachers so loved and revered? What is it about them? And it's not because they were perfect that they're loved. It's because they were perfectly loving. Okay? So you can never be perfect, but you can learn to be perfectly loving. And that, again, starts with you. So do your meditation. Allow yourself to really see clearly the limits of your humanity and where you are with things. And be willing to change, open to change, allowing change, but some things may not change. And those are things that, again, can humble us, and they allow us to stay in tune and in touch with our humanity. They help us to cultivate a mind which can accept limitations in others. Because otherwise, if we can be perfect, then we might be like, hey, I'm perfect. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do it? What's your problem? So I really think this is a key element on a spiritual path. And just cultivating that love for ourselves and for others. And this ties in also with forgiveness, but I'm not going to get into that today. So thank you everyone for listening. I hope you got something from this series of talks. And until next time, namaste and have a great day.